press conference following the introduction to Montserrat officially and the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding for the Blue Halo Initiative with the Waitt Institute and the Government of Montserrat. If I may get the ball rolling to Dr. Johnson, is it? I noticed that you mentioned the Barbuda undertaking. It took about 17 months of consultation. Now, is that the same process that we'll be going through with Montserrat, meaning that the project might not be immediately realized at the moment?
Great question, thank you. I think the exact timeline will differ from place to place. It's not that the consultations are a delay, it's that the consultations are an integral and critical part of the process. So working with stakeholders, getting their input and feedback over the next year or so will enable the regulations and laws that the government decides to put in place to reflect the needs and priorities of the stakeholders. So we are starting immediately, as well as far as collecting some of the scientific data that already exists, planning for an ecological assessment to be done here a few months from now, honing our team, building out the timeline with the experts here about how exactly things are going to work. But I would say it would be accurate that we're starting immediately, although the new policies won't be put in place until after there's been adequate time for stakeholder input.
And regarding the selection of Montserrat at this stage, you have a project running in Barbuda, you're about to establish one in Curacao. What was it about Montserrat that made you make that decision to come to Montserrat at this stage? Was it how vulnerable we are or how advanced we are in that situation?
I would say both. There are a lot of reasons why Montserrat was a great choice for the Waitt Institute as our second site. As I mentioned earlier, what we really look for is an eager and willing partner. We don't want to be forcing ourselves into a place where our help either isn't useful or isn't desired. So coming here, meeting everybody last spring, realizing that there really was the passion for sustainable ocean use. The size of the population meant that we would really be able to have more detailed and nuanced discussions with the stakeholders about what their concerns and priorities were. That Montserrat already has some experience with zoning on the land side, and so there's an opportunity to expand that into the oceans, and that there is really a need for the additional technical expertise and coordination that we can provide.
To Minister Hogan and Premier will come in on this as well. As far as not just the preservation or upkeep of our marine resources are concerned, for our budding fisheries sector, it seems to be increasingly important. How do you see the fisheries sector benefiting from this?
Unlike those of us who might only enjoy the sea, they make their livelihood from the sea. And the zoning in particular, which includes identification of the best spots to fish. And you know, we have some fundamental problems with our fishermen and their fish spots, for example, where because we have, for example, unknown subterranean in the waters, they might put a fish spot a certain place, and due to maybe some underground water movements, that fish spot could disappear over a cliff and be lost forever. So they're having serious issues like those in terms of knowing where best to put a fish spot to aggregate the largest number of fishing. So it will improve their livelihood, increase the return on their investment in fishing.
First thing that we're doing right now is looking for a site manager. So we're undergoing a hiring process to make sure that someone is down here nearly full-time managing the process. So we've got that underway. Andrew Estep, our science manager, is putting together the detailed plan for how to do an ecological assessment of the waters around Barbuda. So the details of the planning are underway, although that won't occur for another 2 months probably. So putting together the best team we can of the top ocean scientists in the Caribbean to come here and do that research, organizing the logistics to happen on the ground as far as what boats we will be using, what types of data we'll be collecting, coordinating with the local experts here about making sure that we're doing something that is in sync with the research that they've already done and augments that and takes it to the next level. So the next steps for science are we are already begun as of yesterday working to collect all of the research that's already been done on Montserrat so we can paint a really clear picture of what's already known and then make sure that the research that we are adding is filling in those gaps. We also were able to visit 2 schools yesterday and start to build relationships with the principals and teachers, are offering educational materials to the schools tailored to the needs and issues that are related to the ocean of Montserrat. So building out curricula and after-school programs or summer camps that we're planning. So it is a bit still in the planning stages, but all of that is a lot of work. So I don't want to say that just because the summer camp doesn't start tomorrow and just because the scientists aren't going diving tomorrow that we aren't all very busy making this happen. There's a bit of a distinction geologically between Kikumjeni and the volcano here. So that's an underwater seamount that's been there for a long time, and so you have a very different set of species and ecological community, especially at the microorganismic level. We don't know yet what is here in Montserrat, and so we're really excited to partner with local experts to figure that out. So I can't answer the question about how any resources discovered might benefit Montserrat because we simply don't know what is there yet, but we're very interested in doing some diving research in the exclusion zone after working with the observatory to figure out what is the safest way to do that, and then seeing sort of what we can find and presenting all that information to the government and technical experts here so that the appropriate decisions can be made about what you want to do. There's been very initial discussions about whether the zoning could include moving the boundaries of some of the maritime zones associated with the volcano. So again, we're here just to provide support. So the decisions about what happens are definitely up to the government and with input from the stakeholders. So if there are particular interests, then we're happy to try to provide the data to inform that decision making.
You mentioned a lot about mangroves and protected areas in terms of reproduction of fish and so on. Now, of course, we have a lot of talk here about one of our mangrove area by this point as our Minister of the Environment is very knowledgeable on. Now, is there any plans in the pipeline? I know that you said that you are still in the plan stage, but is there any plan in the pipeline to seek out and search out those marine protected areas for Montserrat, especially mangrove areas? And what are some of the plans, if there is any plans that you have towards that particular?
Towards mangroves. Well, yes, as you mentioned, mangroves are very important as a nursery habitat for key fisheries species. They protect the coastline from storms. They filter sediment that's coming off land. So it's a critical ecosystem to have. Stephanie Roach, our program manager, has expertise in replanting mangroves. So that is an option for Montserrat if there's interest in that as well. So I think in general, the response would be we can certainly provide scientific recommendations about the importance of maintaining and restoring different ecosystems. Where exactly the boundaries of any new protected areas would be are still very much an open discussion at this point. Everything we do is based on working with local partners. So wherever there are opportunities to collaborate and support each other, that extends not just to different ministries, but also to organizations outside. And they will also have the opportunity to participate as part of the steering group that's going to be weighing in along the process as well.
They were actually here, so I just wanted to find out. My final question. I think the majority of Montserratans, even though you go to the sea and you love the sea, you enjoy the sand, and you maybe do a little bit of swimming at a very basic level along the shore. Is there any plan to teach swimming? You know, all the rules and the proper techniques and life saving and scuba diving. I know Aqua Montserrat is doing a lot of that with the children, but the older ones, they've grown up with this fear of the sea, and so they enjoy the beach. But I mean, there's so much more to see. What plans do you have to
We don't have any terribly specific plans along those lines, but I think the point that you raised is important because the more people have the opportunity to go in the water, to see what's under the water, the more they can relate to the needs of protection and sustainability. So as far as working with not just children, but adult members of the community on swimming and scuba certifications, that's definitely something that we can look into. In Barbuda, we are working on establishing a snorkel club so that we can take people out snorkeling to see what they have in their own waters. Often many people haven't had that opportunity before, and seeing fish and reefs is really exciting, especially for the first time. We also in Barbuda did scuba certification. We sponsored a scuba certification course for all of the local fisheries and park staff so that they would have the skills and the equipment that they need to, whether it's install and maintain mooring buoys or do scientific monitoring, that they would have that skill as well. So there's certainly a possibility to expand those types of programs here in Montserrat based on the interest and working with local partners. The opportunity to see what's underwater absolutely changes everything. When I was 5 years old, I went on my first trip to the Caribbean with my parents. They took me to the Florida Keys and I went on a glass bottom boat, and that was the moment I decided to become a marine biologist. So I definitely can relate to that sentiment. So we'll do what we can to expose people to the world underwater, whether it's on boat trips or snorkeling or through underwater video that we can take footage of and share with people. We'll figure out a way.
Have to involve the youth if you're going to have any sort of sustainability in whatever we do. And I'm particularly impressed with the way you emphasize that the people are going to play a part, especially when you spoke about the fishermen in Antigua and Barbuda, who were involved in determining where the fishing zones were. They were actively involved. I'd really like to see that happen, so that in the end, nothing is enforced on them that they weren't familiar with and played a part in making it happen. So I really look forward to seeing that happen.
Me too. Thank you.
I was a technician last spring when the Dr. Johnson and the first group of Blue Halo technicians came to Montserrat. I was part of the initial round of meetings, and we were undertaking those interventions both in the context of Barbuda and the fact that the OECS had also launched a hydrographic study. And we saw immediately at the technical level that how this could work its way to a benefit. So in fact, the will of this government is not just some political will, it's like a conviction that we have a green agenda, we have our environmental agenda, and that is reflected in our documentation. And you could say that, as the Premier said, by God's divine intervention, we found a philanthropic organization that could help us with that. With regard to the fisheries question, we have a lot of work to do in fisheries. Fisheries is one of the most promising sectors for Montserrat. We import 1 million, it might sound small to a US person, but it's big for Montserrat, $1 million worth of fresh fish in Montserrat, obviously consumed by our visitors, probably mostly, but we actually have a trade imbalance in fish, which means if we can leverage our fishing community and our fishing capability to sell some of that fish, we'll lose or keep $1 million to spend in Montserrat. Simple economics of import substitution. So there is, we know, an area for our fishermen to simply improve their livelihoods, but they need knowledge, intelligence, awareness, right? Communications, organization. They need a boat yard, for example, right? That they could maintain these boats. And we need to also remember, take account of safety of life at sea, which is in another convention called the SOLAS, where we play a little game about it, but seriously we need to look after a whole sector of people who not only have to take care of their own livelihood, but have to feed the whole nation. And in fact, can do so and make a good life out of it if they're properly informed and if they want to do it in concert with all of the other issues that we have to think about when we are fishing, like, you know, the beaches, the reefs, and other sea life, and the use by other people besides fishers. So yes, it's going to be bringing to Montserrat not just tangible support, but to me, a rather more organized way of thinking about how we deal with this other part of our property called our ocean.